Hello, friends, and welcome to Clergy and Collars Getting Coffee. I am Reverend and today my special guest is the Reverend Jerrod Lowry. He is the Executive Presbyter and Stated Clerk for the Presbytery of Coastal Carolina. He served as the pastor of the Community of Grace Presbyterian Church in Sandy, Utah. He is a proud graduate of Johnson C. Smith Theological Seminary in Atlanta, and he hails from Augusta, Georgia, which I'm sure you're also very proud of hailing from, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I say that, but that's where my parents live. I was only in Augusta my senior year in high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm a military brat and a preacher's kid.
Oh,
So
you're a great combo. That's a great combo. So what military branch? Was it Army, Navy,
so
Marine?
Army.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
So we were in so my senior year we moved to Augusta, Georgia from Charleston, South Carolina. We were there for 6 or 7 years in Charleston, and then before that we were in Cleveland, Ohio for probably 8 or 9 years.
So this is
And
why
then
you're a Browns fan.
that's why I'm a Browns fan. It's in the blood. It's
Yeah,
in the
okay.
blood. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I knew that because my dad is a Browns fan, but he grew up in Ashtabula.
Okay.
But always when other people where I'm like, I don't know that you came from Ohio, I'm always surprised when they're Browns fans, but
Oh yeah.
it's it's a hard life being a Browns
It
fan.
is a hard life. I'm all things Cleveland, but Browns are nearest and dearest to my heart. So we did get one championship. Thank you, LeBron. But yeah, being a Browns fan. I mean, even way back when I first fell in love with the Browns, that was the Bernie Kosar days, and so
Wow.
we would almost get there every year.
So I had this like interesting thing, and because you're a Browns fan, you might be more familiar with the players' names as I like no. I know some of those names, right?
Hmm.
And my custodian is a Browns fan, and so his dog is Baker Mayfield. That
Okay.
so like I know very, very little, but it's not a passion I shared with my father. And but in Seneca Falls, we are the home of the National Women's Hall of Fame. And
Hmm.
so when the women are inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame, they always set up the recipient with a local family called they call us ambassadors, where we get to drive them around if they need that, make sure they're at their venues on time,
Hmm.
even slight bodyguarding to make sure people don't shove into
Right.
clothes, whatever. So I had the privilege of my husband and I had the privilege of being the ambassadors for Angela Davis. And yes, it was pretty sweet. And so like her partner was there and one of her sibling came. And so we were chatting with her brother and all this stuff. And we were talking about, the race. They have a race here in town. And so, he was like, oh, what's that about? And then I said, oh, do you run? And he goes, oh, not anymore. My knees are shot. And I was like, oh, sorry to hear that. He goes, yeah, football. I found out later that that man, he said football like nothing. He played for the Cleveland Browns. I was like, you
Wow.
said football like high school. I was thinking
Right,
high
right. That's
school.
what I say when I talk about my knees. I'm talking about an old football injury, and I'm thinking high school, and that's it.
But I was like, no, you played for an NFL team,
Wow.
right? Like I was like, that's no joke, right? Because I grew up in, I grew up in Ohio. I went to Ohio State. We have a great football team.
Hmm.
And yet only 3 or 4 of those players, maybe 2 in a year, any given year, go on to play in the NFL. And it's so interesting the way we talk about it. Now, I didn't know you played football. You have a son who is a football. Now,
Both
only
of my
one.
boys.
Oh, they both play football.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
And do they play the same position as their dad, or are they differently? Shape and size matter.
Yeah, so they are, my youngest, I used to call, or we used to in the house, we call him Littlest Lowry. And now I am the Littlest Lowry. I am, they both are taller than I am. They both are
Mhm.
bigger than I am. And that's a hard thing to grapple with, but and I have to remind them I'm still dad. I mean,
Right.
I'm still don't, but yeah, so they both play football. They're both on the offensive line. I was on the defensive line. My youngest can play on both sides. and he prefers defense, but they both do better at offense. And they're both
Really?
far
So
better than I
fast.
ever was.
So they're fast.
Yeah.
No? Yeah, to play
Yeah,
on off.
they've got some quicks to them.
Yeah. I don't have speed. I have linebacker shoulders, but that's all I got. I have
Yeah.
0 speed. I'm like a wall though. It's even like
There you go.
um but did they, do you think in part that was, and I'm gonna transition to something I view it as very theological, and I think it's because it's the way you frame it,
Mm,
is you seem to have a very public ritual and practice of what you call sweat care.
yeah.
And so could you tell me a little bit more about this? Has been going on for a while. This has been a practice, but with your sons, it's probably most of, I mean, you have a daughter too. It's probably most of your kids' lives, right? That you've been doing this as a practice that they've been watching.
Kind of. So it's evolved and it's developed into something that I call sweat care. So I think, my whole life I've dealt with health and weight, and more weight than health.
Yeah,
Just trying to be skinny, right?
right. You're perfectly
And
healthy, but you want to be skinny. Yes.
That's right. That's right. So it was always about size. I mean, my mom and I, we would go shopping and, we'd go into a store and she'd say, wear the husky pants, right? And
It's a
and
killer
they're
word for,
always, oh, it was brutal. And they were always in the back. They were always on the lowest shelf. They were always dusty.
and not always good choices. I mean, like
No.
I've always been on the bigger side myself. And I was like, why do they think all big women want to look like gardens or animals? Like,
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like everything in our, like anything I get to choose from is either a giant flower print or like
Hmm.
a leopard. And I'm like,
Right.
neither one of those really feel like me.
Right, right. And then you got to walk past all the clothes that you would really like to wear to get to
Yes.
your section. Oh, it was
Yes.
just brutal. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's been my whole life, just dealing with weight. And it transitioned when we moved here. And I started adopting the keto lifestyle, so it's just what I ate, and I did very well with that. But then realized that, I was losing weight, but I was probably also losing muscle,
Mhm.
and that there are healthier ways to do this, or actually you don't have to, because I found out, okay, by watching what I eat, I could get to the weight that I wanted, but you could also add, some workouts, to keep muscle and things of that nature. And so yeah, so I've developed sweat care, because the other thing too that I learned to do was self care. That I've been doing that probably that's been my buzzword for about 5 years now. It's just self care. How do you, care for yourself? And so I try to do it in my, for myself. I try to encourage my family to do it. I even include it in my ministry. So when,
Yeah.
new pastors are coming in to be examined, that's the question that I always ask. So, my commissions on ministry, they know what my question is going to be. It's like, how do you care for yourself?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really important question. I mean, I often remind my people that when I hear like Jesus's call to us to love one another as I have loved you, it's because he realized in his time on earth that we were really bad at loving ourselves. Like that
Oh
maybe
yeah.
we're loving each other the way that we loved ourselves. And so Jesus like, no, 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 you guys are suck at loving yourselves. Love each other the way that I've loved you. And you seem to be paused for a moment. Yeah, I think it's
Oh,
back.
there you go.
It's like a
All right.
weird pause. Um, but I think that is about self-care. I think it's very hard for us to take care of other people. I think our boundaries get foggy.
Hmm.
Um, and by boundaries, we mean like, either thinking too high or too low of oneself. I think there's and those lead to different areas of concern. And I imagine like that's a world as an executor you would live in, more of being concerned about your people's boundaries and burnout.
Oh,
um
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
have you
Yeah.
noticed a difference in, like, has COVID made it people better carers of self, or was it, like, worse?
That's a great question. I think it's a mixed bag. I think that I think COVID, at least for me, what we saw with COVID is how important health was.
Yeah.
One, that health really does equal wealth,
Yes.
and so you really have to be attentive, to your health, and how we take care of ourselves. But I think for some that the pandemic helped them to create better boundaries. And I say better in the sense that, we have hard, fast boundaries that are permeable in places, right?
Mhm.
Um, but the idea of being the pastor that's always on the spot and on call, and I'm there and I'm going to fix the toilet and I'm going to work on the roof and write the sermon and be at your son's baseball game. And, you got to build in time for yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of us have or at least doing better with. Yeah.
Yeah. And one way you do that is sweat care. And now I'll say you post, which I think is very brave, is you post your times and miles and all that, like, which I'm sure is for personal accountability,
Hmm.
and also progress, right? It's a way to chart progress as well.
And
And,
I have people that are doing this with me, so they're seeing my time and they're saying, "Okay, I think we can do this." Yeah,
oh, so you have I mean, it's not just personal accountability. You have a community that also holds you accountable with that.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
And some that even say, "Oh, I see you haven't posted in a while." Whether they're doing it or not, and I appreciate that. I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Let me," because there it can get away from you. You get if I don't do it early in the morning,
Yeah.
trying to do it after a whole day, it's just like, nah, I'd rather not.
Yeah, there are some things I can do because I don't feel like I lift the level of weights you do. So one of the things, like, I'll say I love reading, and then there are times I hate it too,
Mm.
because when you can't unlearn something that's been placed there, right? You just can't be like, no, that didn't actually happen. What that's not how learning works. So, like, when I read that um women suffer, probably they're assuming, from osteoporosis and other things at higher rates, is because women tend to do more cardio aerobic styles of workouts, where men tend to do more weight based, and they're feeling like the weights are probably one of the reasons that building a muscle is probably one of the reasons that the bones are also staying stronger and healthier. So I
Mm.
was like, man, I have to add weight. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to. I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder or a supermodel. So, like, they're not crazy for me, but they are a part of the practice. And so sometimes, like, if I can do the intenser workout in the morning, because I also prefer the morning, then I can do weights when I can do my reps and my weights when I'm watching something. Like, it's a
Hmm.
little,
Hmm.
calmer in the evening. It's not so strenuous for me, because, like, I don't have the same weight practice as our son or my husband, right? They,
Hmm.
they definitely lift larger weights than I have any desire to. I'm like, that hurts.
Yeah, and I'd love to do that. I'd rather lift weights than doing the cardio, but I've realized I've got to incorporate the cardio.
Yeah.
So and again, at this point, I'm trying to unlearn some things that I learned as a child.
It's way
Um,
harder to unlearn.
it is terrible. And so, part of that was you work out to it. Hurting is good, right? So you want to lift until
Yeah,
you
you got
almost
to
can't lift
feel
your
that
arm.
burn, right? You
Yeah,
got
right.
to feel
You
that.
got to
Yeah.
tear the muscle. What you want to do is you literally want to tear it so that you can, in the healing, it builds on itself,
Mhm.
and you want to get bulky. And now I don't want to get bulky, but and I have to even switch that mentality with cardio because I'm thinking, oh, I want my heart rate as high for as long as possible, because if the heart is a muscle, then I want to, push it,
Right.
for this, 30 minutes or so. and then, let it get stronger. But that's not how the heart works.
Nope, that is not the way that works.
Right. So part of what I'm posting is sometimes I'll post my my mileage, but for some people that are they kind of keep me on that. But I'm doing my heart rate, or I'm trying to figure out how do I, and I'm doing a lot of hit cardio. So I go
Yep.
hard for 30 seconds and then try to get my heart rate down for a minute and
Yep.
30. So yeah.
Yep. That's I am a hit. I do hit workouts. I actually really enjoy them. I tried CrossFit and I've tried lots of things, and I'm
Uh-huh.
like, a part of it was CrossFit needed to be done in a real community, like at the gym.
Hmm.
And I realized that I do not like to talk to people first thing in the morning.
Mm.
I like to talk to people, but I'm like a slow
Yeah.
riser.
Yeah. Yeah. Know thyself. I love it.
Uh-huh. That I
I love
was like, but I'm also really competitive.
it.
And so
Mm.
like it was hard because I'm like, my body really isn't ready to do that. But the idea that someone was like double timing my stuff annoyed me. So I probably would have been the fittest in my life if I had stuck with it, but there was
Yeah.
no joy in it for
Hmm.
me. And it wasn't because of the people in the class. They were great. It
Hmm.
was because of like my own stuff that I hadn't yet unlearned. Um so one of the things, and I'm gonna again shift here and to grief, and if you don't want to talk about it,
Mm.
just tell me. Um but also like to talk about that health and whatever. Um, has that become also extra important now in this process of transitioning to, your children's only surviving living parents?
Hmm.
And they are still young.
Yeah.
All of them are still young.
Yeah.
Even if they're becoming adults, they're still young.
Hmm.
Um,
My
and
baby
so
girl wants to remind me that she's about to turn 21 next month. She keeps reminding me, but yeah, she is still my baby girl.
yes, and also her brain isn't fully developed yet, so she's not an adult,
Right.
even if she wants to be.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I mean that feels really bizarre. I'm having trouble with 14. I don't even I
Mm.
had a nephew turn 21 recently, and that felt weird.
Hmm.
He's
Hmm.
not even my kid, but I held him as an infant.
Yeah.
Um, but like, has that also shifted some of those
Mm-hmm.
conversations about self-care, health,
Mm-hmm.
boundaries?
Yeah, yeah. I think, and again, 5 years ago when I kind of started this, it was a part of something that my wife and I were doing. We weren't both doing keto, but we were both learning kind of the hard way how important it is to take care of ourselves and our health. With her, we were actually our entire relationship. We were um, wrestling with, trying to manage, health issues and crises, um, because of unprocessed grief, really.
Wow.
And she had just started working on, okay, how do we process it? How do I, manage that? And all of the implications, I guess, from holding that in for 30 years. And so, yeah, so this self-care journey is grief is very much tied, to it. Some ways it's the catalyst for it. And again, I've learned in many ways how important it is to be at least to be attentive to your health. You know, yeah, yeah, it's important.
Yeah, I mean, it's and though, but you have been very vulnerable with
Mhm,
uh Molly's passing,
mhm,
um just everything involved in that in a way that I think is so helpful to us, because I find this as a pastor, and I don't know if you do as well. Like, I call it like the first few days or weeks or months, like it's that business of death, right? As
mhm,
a family
mhm,
member, like there's so
mhm.
much business to take care of.
Right.
And and everybody's there during that time. Like, you have such a supportive community during that time, but like, you haven't even begun. It's not even setting in that it's real, really.
Mm-hmm.
Cause you're like, I have to notify, all these things. I have to plan a service. I have to do these things that, and in your added case, like, I've got to attend to my children as well while I'm grieving. And all that is really important. But then I find what happens is those 3, 4, 5 months down the road, where it finally sets in to the people in what the innermost circle, that their loved one is gone. The community has kind of gone, oh, but what's that?
Mm-hmm.
That was a little while ago now. And you're like, yeah, that's not the way grief works. Like, and
Right.
also, like, but now I don't have any business. Like, now the business of death is done. So now I can actually begin the process of grieving. And I like that you make it like you share memories, you
Mm-hmm.
talk still about heartbreak and
Mm-hmm.
loss.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think that's really important for all of us to remember, that even if people aren't actively posting it, we are all carrying that.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, one of the things, and this has been, oh man, looking back now, so, my wife, we both got COVID August of 2021. And I started to get better and she started to get worse after, about a good week. Um, and so she spent 60 days in the hospital in ECMO, in a medical induced coma. And now I realize that, because again, I'm leaning into it. So I think,
Right.
one of the things that I've learned is you really have to embrace it. You really have to lean into it. You can't run from it. You can't ignore it. Uh, and so leaning into it, I've realized that even while she was in the hospital, right, and I would
Right.
be visiting her, and so she's unconscious, and I'm sitting there. My prayer is, breathe. I mean, that's, I'm there for hours, just kind of praying that she
Right.
breathe. Um, but even through those 60 days, I was grieving, you
Yeah.
know. I was thinking about, okay, so when she does get up, maybe, we'll need to, have oxygen in the house, because it
Right.
was all about the lung that had been just pulverized by COVID. So I was like, okay, so I'm envisioning in my mind, well, maybe we put an oxygen tank here, and we get a long cord that stretches here, and we build holes in the
Right.
wall, and and that maybe we don't, we go on vacations, we just have to go someplace where we can take oxygen, and so
Right.
I'm still
Very
kind of thinking
practical.
about, yeah, how our life is going to shift and change, and even in that, I'm hopeful, but I'm still grieving, right? Life is not going to be the same, or
Right.
the dreams that we had are not going to be exactly as they were. And then, of course, when she died, then it's just, and still, it took a while for that. I now know that I was in shock, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Even the day of the service, and I can tell you a lot of dates about just that timeline, but whatever day that was, it had to have been 7, maybe 10 days after she died, we had her service. And I remember, you know, looking out on the people who showed up, one being shocked that there were people there, but looking out, and there was like there's a wall of light, behind, like, I could see 2 rows and then just white. It was just, I couldn't see faces. I couldn't tell who was there. I remember afterwards people would come up to me and they're talking, and I cannot hear what they're saying. It's
No.
like, the Charlie Brown teacher, wah, 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 wah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I'm sitting there and I know I'm smiling because I know they're talking to me and they're saying something nice or trying to encourage, but I can't hear you,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, you've got to lean into it. You've got to embrace it. And I'm a part of some widow communities on Facebook, and so again, just the sharing of what we're going through kind of helps to hate to say normalize, but it really does, to say, okay, I am not crazy. This
Oh,
is, this is what's going on. But it's like riding a wave. Grief is like being at the beach, and the water is like up to your chest, and the wave is coming. It's coming. It's gonna lift you off your feet. There is nothing you can do but ride the wave and know that at some point you will be back in the sand again.
yeah.
And the next wave is coming. So
And I'm not going to go into here, but I'm somebody who wrestled with an ocean wave like in real life, and I lost that battle, and it was brutal. And when I hear that now, I'm like, yeah, sometimes that's it. Sometimes that wave that comes in picks you up by the head and slams you into the rock before you stand on that sand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. The gentle wave just lifts you up and puts you back down. Yeah, yeah.
Right. But some of those waves are not so gentle. And I'll say, like, even in my case, one of my injuries didn't even appear and begin to cause pain until 2 years after the accident.
Yeah.
And you're like, didn't even know it happened. And
Mm-hmm.
and then you're in another bout of recovery. And so I'm like, yeah, that's what grief is like, right? It's not this like, sometimes it can be a gentle flowing breeze. You get a nice reminder of a memory and you're like, oh, that's so pleasant,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then other times you're like, oh,
yeah. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I thought. So in that, I mean, your faith is, you have a very strong whole like faith background and current, present. But have you found like you've gotten into some I call them theological wrestling matches with God? Like I always think of Jacob and the angel when I think about like God and I tussle a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know what other people do, but God and I, we tussle. And again, it almost always leaves me with a limp, but also a blessing. And so have you found, like, has that been something you've always done? Have you done more in this process of this like new phase you found yourself in the last few years?
Yeah, that's a good question. Even my counselor asked me, and let me say that if you are a pastor that does not have a counselor, then you may not be doing ministry right. You've really gotta, you need Jesus and a counselor. Let's
Yeah,
just put it like that.
I love Jesus, a counselor, and a coffee, and
Yeah,
my meds. Like, let's
there you
not.
go. Yes,
They
yes,
are a life saver,
all the
mostly
things.
because they help me to access the tools. That's what
Yes.
I'll say, right? Is like, it doesn't space me out, because if it's spacing
Hmm.
you out, it's probably, well, it might not be the right balance for you. But all those things do is help me to access the tools in my toolbox.
That is correct.
That's it.
Yeah. You use all the resources you can, right? And
Right.
and these are resources. These are, and really, if we talk about, sense of call, that these are people that are called to these professions, right? So it's not just the pastor that's called, or the ruling elder that's called to do the work of the church.
Right.
But I believe that my counselor is called to that work, and
Right.
for me and for her clients,
Yeah.
and for that I'm grateful. So use all the tools.
Yeah.
um but yeah, I love the idea of wrestling with God. And I think I brought my counselor up because she asked me if I was mad at
Yeah.
God, or have I gotten angry. And I haven't. I don't. um I would love to, and I do wrestle with God about you know things, but just not about this particular grief, and Molly's loss, and whatnot. You know, um, yeah, I think wrestling with God is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one thing that I always just say is, if you're angry at God, I think when you're angry at someone, you look them straight in the eyes, right? And I
Right.
think it's not this, oh, I love you and things. When you're mad, you're here, and
Yes.
I think God can handle it.
Well,
so.
yeah, and I think we have story after story. I would say the Psalms in general are just like,
Mhm.
an emotion wheel. like like someone could probably create a Psalm emotion wheel like they use for being able to identify your feelings. Because
That's
I'm
awesome.
Go ahead.
No, that is awesome. I mean, really. So that was something that I was introduced to. Again, growing up, emotions were something that you kind of they were in the way,
Right.
right? So you had a
Some are
goal, you
bad
need
and some are good.
that's right. But you had that goal, and the goal is out there, and then you feel this thing, and you have to tell yourself, put that emotion away so you can achieve the goal, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I had these, I didn't know how to process my own emotions. I saw emotions as bad things.
Right.
Um, and so my counselor introduced me to the wheel, because really the breadth of explaining my emotions were I feel good or I feel bad,
Right.
or
I'm
I'm
angry,
happy
I'm
or
sad.
sad. That's it. Those were the four, right? And I think what happened, I got hit by a work truck. It was during the pandemic. I was on my bicycle, hit by a work truck,
Yes, I remember
and
this very
yeah,
vaguely. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm at the doctor's office and she says, explain the pain. And I'm like, it hurts. And she says, no, explain it. And I'm like, how do you explain pain? And she's like, well, is it stabby? Is it achy? Is it throbby? Is it like a, I was like, wow. I just had not, availed myself to the
Right.
idea that there were these there's a full expanse of emotion and feeling and all that. And so she introduced me to a body scan,
Yeah.
and so I've introduced my boys to that. So we talked about my son playing football. He had a concussion
Yes,
last
that's
week.
terrible. Oh,
Yeah, well, was it last week or the week before?
it was
but
the week
but
before, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, part of our that's right, because he didn't play last week. So part of our um and so I'm trying I've been teaching them the body scan, So let's kind of let's sit, let's assess kind of what are we feeling, where are we feeling, what are we
How are we
feeling,
feeling? Right.
how are we feeling? Yeah,
And
yeah.
the thing that other like a chiropractor, massage therapist, like these are people, acupuncturist, whatever you go to from
Mm,
time to time. One of the things that I have learned from, using those again resources at various points in my life is that sometimes the pain in my foot is actually a pain in the hip,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
you're like, what? No, it's a pain in the foot. And they're like,
Yes.
no, it's
Yeah,
connected.
yeah, yeah.
And and so there, like, that's also the importance of the body scan, because in doing that, you might be like, actually, all the tension I'm holding is like, here. And then,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
radiating down to my fingers or whatever. But in doing that, you kind of walk, you walk through that. Yeah. One of the, speaking of concussions, one of the things that we noticed in our son, because eh, once you've been hurt, sometimes there can be a hesitancy to
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
try again. And so our eldest had, he has severs, which is like growth plates, right? It's in the
Mm-hmm.
ankles, so they're too long. So he got benched, I don't know, 5 months and PT for that. This is all during middle school. So, right, all the time you're growing, but also all the like awful people can be really terrible. People
Yeah,
can be real terrible.
especially
And
middle school.
oh, you want to know
Yeah.
the truth, go talk to a middle schooler. But that's
Mm-hmm.
not true. Actually, go talk to a toddler. The middle schooler will just tell you however they're feeling and can't process it. That's what
Right.
they're telling you. But
Right.
but and then he got better. And then in track, he tore his ligament like right at the beginning of the season. So he's out for another like 8 weeks. So like we added it up and we think he was out probably in middle school, probably 8 months of
Mm.
not just little action, like nothing. He wasn't allowed to do anything. And and then we've noticed when he came back, he was hesitant. Like he
Mhm.
still has that like hesitancy to like use his body,
Yep.
and he plays soccer, but it's very much a contact sport, and you head the
Mhm.
ball and you do these things.
Mhm.
And so we ended up getting him one of these concussion headbands for games and practice, because I don't know if it's a placebo effect or not, whatever.
Yeah.
But we're like, you
Try
can't,
it.
right? Because you can't
Yeah.
avoid this whole part of the game. If you're gonna play
Right.
the game,
Mm-hmm.
you can't, this is a time where you had the ball or whatever. But again, like seeing my children sometimes going through stuff like that, then it gives me an opportunity to step back and reflect with a different perspective in my own life and ministry, to go, maybe I'm also hesitant, like maybe things are going on as well for me, and the hurts are different, but to proceed forward. And the
It's
way
interesting.
that, you notice God invites that, like God's
Yeah.
making those invitations, and then you're like, man, I'm sorry I turned you down so often, God. I
See,
didn't.
and I've got the opposite going on. So
Oh, you say
he's
yes all the
trying to, well, he's trying to run back in. Like, we've got the protocols and all that kind of stuff. And we were at the hospital the night he got the concussion. We're waiting on the CT scan. And, I'm reading through, there are 5 protocols that you've got to do after the symptoms go
yeah.
away. And he's thinking, oh, I can do those by Monday. And I'm like, no, one, even if you could, let's not. Let's take the time, let's slow down. And so I think what I'm really realizing, and so the me 5 years ago would have been right there with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, son, let's just, let's get through this, get back in the game. No matter what you're feeling or whatever, just put that to the side, and for the sake of the team. And that was my way of doing ministry too. And so, I tell the story that, 3 kids, and I didn't bring any of them home from the hospital. None
Really?
of them. All 3 of them were released from the hospital on a Sunday. But my thought was, you all can get home. Let me go. The team is gathering at the church, and
Wow.
I am the quarterback of the team. I've got
And
to be there.
not one of your congregants went, what are you doing here?
No. Well, and they may not have known, to be honest with you. I don't know that
Okay.
they knew, but my mentality was, I was willing to sacrifice my own health, the health of, in not health of my family in this instance, but in instances, the health,
Yeah.
because the team is out there, right?
Right.
Um and so, if I had the mentality then that I have now, where it's, I've got to be, and this is my thing about self-care, where I tell people, self-care, the image is, when you get on a plane, they say, if something should happen, mask will fall from the ceiling, and you put your mask on first before you help someone else. And that's what self-care is. And so now I understand that in order for the team to be its best, I've got to be my best.
Yeah.
And so we've got to take care of this. So I need him to slow it down, right? I need you to be your best, to get healthy, let your brain heal. And then, when that happens, you can go back out, and help your team. But if you're not 100%, then you can't give your team 100%, and you're not helping your team.
No, and actually the most helpful thing you can do right now, then, if you can't physically be there, is you can still be present, right? You can still cheer them along. And that is not a nothing role, right? That's not
Right,
nothing. And I
right.
think sometimes we act like the bench is nothing. And you're like, nope, they
Mm-hmm.
are not nothing. They get us ready. The people who are in the game get ready and prepared by the people on the bench.
Right.
It's often, sometimes it's somebody on the field, sometimes it's somebody on the bench that is the support or the word you are able to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, sometimes I've noticed it's not that everybody isn't telling you, slow down, take it easy. It's like, but there's only one person that you're hearing.
Right. Right. And the view that you get when you're not so the part of the problem is, if you're in the game, you can't see the whole field.
No.
So you know what it's like to be on the field. Now you're here and you can see more of what's going on, so you could help your player on the field to say, hey, you may not be seeing this, but the guy is coming. He's always coming on your left side, that kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So
So as
that,
an executor and stated clerk, do you feel like that's part of the gift that those positions give to the denomination?
absolutely, absolutely. Because and I remember, when you're in the church, you've got your you're the pastor of kind of what's going on with all the committees,
Yes.
that's going on in
Right.
your congregation. But what you don't know is what's going on with the congregation down the street.
Correct.
So
Right.
I've got 107. There are 174 congregations in the Presbytery of Coastal Carolina,
A
and
lot.
so it is.
Well, it's
There
like
are.
we're like 51. I think we might even be 50 now because I can't remember. Like we're just closed there. I don't know if it actually closed yet. So but so that means you're triple our size.
Hmm. Well, and I think we've got the most in any presbytery in the denomination, but a lot of a lot of churches under 100, definitely under 50 members.
Right.
And so, but again, so what I see is kind of the was it 30,000 foot view or 10,000 foot view,
Right.
kind of what's going on with these churches, that they may not be able to see. And so they think there are a lot that think we are the only ones that are struggling in this way, or we the only
Right.
ones that are suffering in this way. So a lot of times when I go to these churches, it's to encourage them by saying, you're not the only one, right? Um, it's sharing. You're on the field, you're in the battle, whatever.
Right.
But the view from up here is just you're not alone. This is
You're
not,
not
again,
alone.
kind of like with the widows group. You're
Yeah.
not crazy, yeah.
Yeah, and so with all of that, is there then with that 30,000 viewpoint, with that gift of talent in reminding people that they're not alone, that's why we do this as a presbytery, because we're not alone, right? Is there a conversation that you feel like the church or the larger church isn't having that we
Yes,
really need to be having?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
You want to tell me what
Grief,
that is? You're like, it's too much.
grief,
Okay.
grief. We have not, and I think again, part of it is it's my perspective. It's where I am now, right?
Yeah.
And have been, but what I realized, wrestling with leaning into my own grief, is that it's the same as, or it's similar. It's still grief is what I'm hearing from, my congregations. I knew coming here, um, I was in Sandy, Utah for 9 years, and then, took this call um in 2018. And I knew coming in that there would be, people talk about dying churches, quote
Yes,
unquote,
yes,
and I
yes.
hate that. I hate that. Um, But what I realized is that in some of these quote unquote dying churches
Yes.
are in towns that have already died. Like there's no school, right?
Yeah.
You've got to they're the kids are bused. If they're kids, they're bused to the nearest school. There's no grocery store.
Nope.
Their grocery store is a gas station.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
It's
um,
yeah.
and there's a town hall that's open, Tuesday, Thursday, or something
Right.
like that.
There's
I
no
mean, that's
library, there's
no,
nothing.
nothing. There is the church is the last thing that's really left. This is the last institution that's left in town. And that the people there are they're not just grieving what has happened to their church in terms of the size
Right.
shrink, but that people, their kids had to move in order to get jobs, and no, their grandkids are not, or their kids are not moving back.
Nope. They
That
can't.
that
There's
they're
nothing for them if they did.
That's right. That's right. And so there's a lot of unprocessed grief going on in the church, and so it presents itself as you know, we're angry at, you know, whatever. If only we had, you know, a young pastor with 2.5 kids, you know, to come and bring, you know, kind of raise a youth group by, you know, it's always the seat of his loins. It's never hers, the seat of his loins, you know,
Yes.
um, then things would be fine. And no,
Yeah.
they would, but dealing with grief, that's where we need to have some conversation about how do we deal with communal grief, and the Bible has plenty of resource, you
Yes.
know, as
Yes.
long as we start to see that what we're doing is grieving. You know, the Psalms are rife,
Yeah.
plentiful.
I mean, it's very fascinating what you're bringing up. I I think that you know, sometimes what I prefer talking about language that is more about um legacy,
Mm.
stewardship, in terms of like not just money, but stewardship is also our gifts. And I do think, and part of it is because the Bible tells me so on this, right?
Mhm.
The gifts that you need to serve, the gifts that you need are there. Whatever
That's
it
right.
is that you need, it's already present.
Everything we need, we've got.
Yeah. And so that's like a stronghold. So I'm like, even if you're small, even if you're whatever, how do we discern what it is that God is calling us to do with where we are?
Now.
Right. Yeah, and some of that might be identifying grief. You know, we have had this congregation where I serve, there's been a lot of loss in this year. It just happens like that sometimes, that you have just like it's
Hmm.
just all together. Um, they were, you know, very active people, very like, you know, all this stuff. Additionally, we have had giants in our community, people we partner with in ministry outside of church also pass away. And some of those people had lovely services or are going to have lovely services. Some of them didn't do anything, or they did it just with the family or whatever. I think the rituals are important. And because some of the church family was not included in that ritual, this year for All Saints Day, um I said, well, what would happen? What if we just try this? We generally invite people to bring like a picture or an item or something
Hmm.
of anybody you lost in any given year, place it up on the communion table, right? We name the people who have passed away from the
Hmm.
church that year, but obviously we always bring that stuff with us. So this year I was like, let's instead let us bring, and so you can bring as much or as little as you want, uh the favorite food of
Hmm.
the person that you loved and you've lost,
Hmm.
whatever it is. And then after worship, we will go downstairs in coffee hour. We will eat the food that is at the table, whatever it is. It doesn't need to make sense. You don't need to coordinate it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And we'll tell the stories of the people.
Mm.
We'll tell whatever those
Yeah.
stories are of the
Yeah.
people that we have lost. And that will be an extended communion,
Hmm.
fellowship, whatever. I mean, for me, it's communion.
Hmm.
Because for some of those people, they're people that we didn't get to mourn we didn't get the ritual
Right.
associated with that are important at the grieving process, and not just the ones that come right up front. I think
Hmm.
the things I like about Jewish and Muslim traditions they're the ones I'm most familiar with that do this, though I think they are also embedded in Hinduism and even Buddhism a little bit more. I don't know why Christianity doesn't seem to do this as much, or at least not Protestantism. I feel like
Hmm.
the Catholics do, right? The yearly prayers on the
Hmm.
anniversary of someone's
Hmm.
death,
Hmm.
or you know, not just on All Saints Day, but I think those rituals help us.
Absolutely.
And I think there's this push in mainline Protestantism, or maybe it's just PCUSAism, like to just roll past the grief. And
Hmm.
then what you're going is, no, the grief is the
Yes.
problem.
Yeah.
Us not dealing with the grief is an issue.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, because we're still holding it, right?
Yeah.
Even if we try to get past it, it's like, you know, what was it? It's in the exam in Saint Ignatius. There's some Thibodeau, I think, one of the writers talks about having hidden furniture in the
Yeah.
room. And it's that one piece of furniture where in the dark you keep bumping your big toe against it.
And it
And so
hurts.
and it hurts. It hurts. And so you got to address. You got to address the furniture in the room. You got to address where you are.
Yeah.
Let's deal with it. Let's wrap our arms around it. Let's raise an Ebenezer, have some kind of ritual about it.
Right.
And then really deal with it. And so in that way, because we can try to move on, but it's moving with us, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so I mean, this is the title of my podcast comes because I was a huge fan. I am a huge fan of Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this wonderful interview with Trevor Noah. And
Mm-hmm.
this was before Trevor Noah, he had been announced as the new, like it's a while ago now, because now, of course, he's gone. He has just been announced as the host. And so there's this moment where they're, having coffee. And Jerry Seinfeld says to him, I think pain is the knowledge that your body needed at that moment.
Hmm.
And he said, you bump your toe on that piece of furniture, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that was knowledge that you needed, right? The pain is like, hey, this piece of furniture is right here. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It was knowledge that you needed at the moment. And I was like, whoo, that's a very different way, like, to think about pain.
Yeah.
That pain might be that knowledge that we needed in the moment. And so if we
Mm.
just say, no, that I didn't need that knowledge, it's gonna keep
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
gonna keep coming back until
Right.
you learn it. God's like, I have nothing but time.
Or it's the body telling you there's something wrong here you've got to address.
Yeah.
There's something going on. You've got to pay attention to this leg. All right. Or like you said, you may feel it in the leg, but it's really there's something somewhere else that is causing now the leg, to hurt. And you've got to address it. You have
Yep.
to.
You have to address it. It's beautiful. So I look forward to your webinar on that to teach all the rest of us in the Presbytery how to do that, or your book or whatever. I feel like it'll be coming.
Yeah.
But this brings us to the close of our time together. There is a question I always ask my guests because I do think of it as being a symbol of the Holy Spirit, or a modern day visual of what the Holy Spirit is the Care Bear, right?
Mm.
Because they just have a unique gift, something that is corely, them as they were created, whether it's grumpiness or sunshine and rainbows, it doesn't matter. It's uniquely them. And they use it and shine that light out into the world without hiding it under any bushel in order to heal, right, the world
Yeah.
that they're in. So, so if you were a Care Bear, if
Okay.
Jerrod is a Care Bear, what color Care Bear are you? What color is that fur, or colors? I'm not going to limit you. And what is the emblem on your belly? What is that core thing that
Mm.
shining out
It
into all?
shines. Yeah.
Yeah.
80s babies unite, right?
Yes. Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And I see your Care Bear just over your shoulder
Yeah,
there.
mine has an anvil on its belly, which I had to add because there's no anvil Care Bear.
Ooh, I
Because
like that.
yes, well, for me, I feel like I have a gift of mercy, and it was described to me once by one of my mentors as mercy is an anvil. It is
Mm,
the tool that other tools hit themselves against in order to take shape.
wow. I love that. Yeah,
Yes,
I was
and
thinking anvil and I was thinking Looney Tunes and it just falls from the
it's gonna
side.
fall on your head. You're just gonna stop.
It's like,
But no, I think because I told her, she told me she thought I had this gift.
mm,
And then weeks later, I worked at the summer camp with her. Weeks later, I went up to her and I was like, Faye, I don't like this gift. I don't like it. This hurts a little bit. What you've described to me, I don't like it. It hurts and I want to give it back. And she's like, yeah, God's gifts, you can't re-gift them. You don't get to like,
yeah.
You don't get to give them back.
Yeah.
And she's like, let me tell you why I think that this gift, I told you that I discerned that, you know, she had a dream, and that's the gift she felt, she was a message she felt she was supposed to deliver to me. And she's like, let me tell you why I think you're telling me it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And I have sat with that image forever, and only in learning to lean into it, as you so said, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Has it really taken on and become a not that it never hurts, but that I'm not actively always being hurt. Like, 'cause I recognize I was designed, and not designed to be hit in order for people to take abuse. Like, that's
Right.
not what
Right.
anvil is, right?
Right.
It's to take shape to get their gift, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's very different. So for me, that might speak to something like accountability, which now I call holy feedback. Let me give you some
Mm-hmm.
holy feedback, right? You know, or you know, it's compassion, it's suffering alongside somebody. It's, you know, it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's whatever. It's sometimes advocating and sometimes holding space for silence. Like, but only in leaning into it and not wanting to give it back did I begin to see it as a gift.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so what is your belly gift? That's mine.
So that's a great question. So when you said color, let me
Yeah.
go color first.
I really
Is
feel like your fraternity colors are gonna shine through in this moment.
you that's where I'm going. I am going, is there a color darker than black? But I'm definitely going, you know, jet black, maybe even sequin black, it's got a little sheen
Little
to it or
shimmer.
something.
Yeah.
Um and I'm thinking, and I was thinking black because the fraternity colors, of course, love that. But I feel like that I've got this. I don't want to say it's a call. I never want to talk about my sense of call, or I've always struggled with being like, oh, I'm called to this, but I have this ability black is not, or what is it? They say when you're in black, like dark spaces, it's not the absence of there's light
Yes.
still in
Yeah,
those
yeah, yeah.
spaces. And I feel like that part of my gift, part of my call is to go into spaces where people feel like there's no light
Mm-hmm.
and say, no, there is light here, you know? Um, and I think so my belly gift is, how about a magnet?
That's
Uh
awesome.
yeah, to because what I am is I'm a gatherer,
Yeah.
I like to pull people in. And I think if I can um pull people that don't know they're in dark spaces into seeing the light in those dark spaces, and even people who think they're alone in dark spaces,
Yes.
inviting other people in to say, listen, we're here together. I think that would be my Care Bear. I'm a black sequin Care Bear with a golden magnet on my wrist.
That's awesome. I will say it has been a secret desire of mine that somebody who's super crafty and loves theology has been listening to this, and they're
Uh-huh.
secretly just crafting all our Care Bears, and they're gonna
Yeah.
one day just gift them to us. I just have like, it's not happening, but I just have this, like, it's this secret wish that like this new level of like God's Care Bears are just gonna come out
Mm,
into the world or something. I don't know, and be
yeah.
birthed. You can really design your own Care Bear in such a thing, because I would love, you know, even if it's a sticker, I would love it
Mm-hmm.
like be there to remind us, right, to tether
Mm,
to that notion of like, yeah, you have this unique ability to bring people in and to remind them that there is light present and
it's
that they're
like,
not
yeah.
alone. That's a really, really powerful gift. So I am looking forward to seeing how you're going to do that, not only in Coastal Carolina, but for our denomination at
Yeah,
large. So I thank you for carving time out to be here today.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Thank you for this. So, and let me just say that Care Bear, that was great. My dear friend of mine who died this year, by the name Buddha was what we call. I don't know if you did you know Buddha Montreat, bald head
I don't feel
gentleman.
like I did. I did. I spent my time at Montreat more when I was a child than I have in my
Yeah.
adult life.
He used to call me Sugar Bear, and because he said I had Care Bear qualities, so
Yeah.
that was great. So, but thank
That's
you for
awesome.
this time. This has been fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you.